All right, in this set of examples, we will begin exploring the JavaScript programming language, the third core technology of front-end web development alongside HTML and CSS. JavaScript allows us to make our websites interactive, dynamic, and responsive to user input. Whereas HTML gives structure and CSS controls styling, JavaScript adds behavior. In these projects, you're going to learn how to use JavaScript to respond to user actions like button clicks and form submissions, access and modify the page content using the DOM, the document object model, control element styles and attributes dynamically, work with variables, arrays, functions, and event listeners, implement basic logic such as input validation or condition checking. We'll begin with basic examples that use JavaScript to update the page based on user input or interaction. As these examples progress, we'll apply fundamental programming techniques to solve small real-world problems and reinforce best practices to clean event handling and progressive enhancement. We'll also learn how JavaScript fits into a typical web workflow. JavaScript code is written in a .js file typically, and we link it with or from the HTML. It runs in the browser and interacts with the live web page. JavaScript can update content, styles, and structure without reloading the entire page. By the end of this module, you'll have built a solid foundation for using JavaScript to bring your web pages to life, making them smarter, more interactive, and better suited to real user needs. All right, we're going to start with a greet me example, and for these, I'm going to start with my JS exercises working directory, and I'm going to create subfolders for each of these because we have a lot of them with the same exact name for the actual files. So I'm going to right-click here, create a new folder. We'll call this 1-greet-me, so greet me. And inside of this, I'm going to create a new file, index.html. I'm also going to create a CSS file, which is going to be called styles.css. And I'm going to create a script called script.js. Now, in real life or industrial settings, you might put these in subfolders. Index would be at the top level, but you might put the scripts in one folder and styles in another. But for here, since we have one of each, we're just keeping them all together. You'd also probably come up with more creative names in a lot of cases, unless it's, say, the main. If it's the main style, you might call it main.css or something like that. For scripts, you might have the main.js or app.js, depending on the circumstances. But we'll keep it pretty simple. All right, so for these, just to save a little bit of time, I'm going to copy over some of the code, and then we will look at it together. Okay, so there's our HTML. I'll copy them, and then we will discuss them. Let me grab the CSS from my notes that I wrote earlier. So here's the styles.css, and then the JavaScript's actually fairly small. So let's look at that. All right, so with the HTML, let's look at how we're going to do this. With HTML, you'll see doc type HTML at the top, obviously. That's just the doc type that's required with HTML. Language is English, etc., etc. All the HTML looks pretty standard from what you're used to. For this one, we're going to have the user enter a name, and it's going to greet them using this paragraph that has the greeting output in it. So the general idea behind this project is that it introduces the DOM, or document object model access, event handling, and basic functions in JavaScript. So when the user types their name into this input box and they click a button, a personalized greeting is displayed. All right. So you've got the greeting app, you've got this header here in the semantic element, main, and you've got the footer down here. Now, you'll notice the style is included in the header. You can include the script in the header, but if you do that, you have to surround your JavaScript code, or at least do an association where it waits on the window load event, which we'll talk about briefly. But here, since we put the link at the very bottom, script.js, it will wait until all the elements are loaded in the DOM before it tries to process the script. So inside here is where the JavaScript lives. For this one, you'll have a function here, which you can just think of as something that we can tell to do something else, so it performs an action. And then we tell it right here to get a reference to the greet button which is in the HTML, that's going by its ID, and to add an event listener to it. And that takes two arguments or two parameters. We've got click and greet user. Greet user is the name of the function. Notice you don't have parentheses after it inside here. You just give it the name of the function it's supposed to call. It's supposed to execute this code here when the click event occurs. This is a standard name for the event. You might also see someone put, say, document.getElementById greet button dot onClick equals greet user. That would be another way to do it. So two different ways. So the onClick technique, if we said something dot onClick equals greet user, the something could be this document.getElementById. That is called the DOM core style or the DOM level 0 style. The style that we're using here is the DOM level 2, okay, or sometimes it's called the DOM HTML module. So core is the older style, and then the HTML style, which we're using here, is less restrictive. It's more flexible. We can actually add additional things to it, and that is preferred, okay? So once it does this association. It says when the document, since this is all at the end of the file here, when it's included instead of the header, when this file loads, what it will do is it won't call this function or do this stuff even though it occurs at the very beginning. It only calls it when you call it, meaning you have to actually tell it to call it or you associate it with an event, and then when that event occurs, it calls this function. So this is inside of the file, but it's not called yet. This is the first line that it encounters that it's actually doing something directly. So this is saying when the document will be available now. That represents the whole document. This is called the DOM. We're navigating the DOM or document object model. So it finds the thing with the ID greet button. And if I go over to HTML, this button is greet button. That's its ID. So it does that, and we add event listener. The event is click, so when it clicks, it calls that function. So how does the function work? In the function, it grabs the name input, okay, and stores that in name input. It grabs the reference to greeting output and stores that in output. Notice that the input and the output are the actual elements. They aren't the text inside these things. So they represent the actual elements in memory. So name input is this thing. This input type equals text. So text field. And then greetings output or greeting output is this paragraph. So they represent those elements. Now, what do we do in the actual text or the actual code? We grab references to them, then we grab the actual text of the name by doing this. So we say name input.value, so whatever they typed when they clicked this button, it grabs that value and it trims it, meaning if they put any extra spaces in the front or at the end, it will trim them from both sides. And as long as that name is not empty, if it is empty, it'll say, please enter your name. If it is not empty, it'll say, hello, then the name, welcome to the site. Now we have to be careful here because these right here are not single quotes, okay? So single quotes look like this. Double quotes look like that. That's two double quotes, two single quotes. These are tick marks, okay? This is what we call a string template, okay? This right here, these are found on the key above the tab key on the left on the standard keyboard that I'm using here in America. And I think most English keyboards, it's in the same place. It's on the same key as the tilde, which is the little squiggly thing. So that little, this thing right here. So if you held down shift, you would get the tilde, okay? But this is what you need on either side. That makes it so that you don't have to do something like this. So if I wanted to, I could say output.textContent equals hello, and then concatenate it with name, and then say welcome to the site. But that can be a little bit confusing and unwieldy, and you have to keep escaping these string literals and then plugging in the variables here. Okay, you could do that. It totally works, but this is a preferred style using the string template style. Formally, you might see documentation refer to it as a template literal, or you might see it also called a template string or a string template. But the official term per the ECMA script is template literal. So just keep that in mind. But these, you'll notice, have double quotes. Double quotes, single quotes are the same in JavaScript. So I could put them around here if I wanted. But down here, since I'm interpolating, okay, inserting a string here, a variable here, I use this syntax. So you put $, and then inside these curly braces, you put the name or the name of the variable or identifier of the variable, which is this thing. A variable is just like a box that holds something in the memory. So in this case, it will hold whatever the user entered there. So let's look at what this looks like. You have to right-click the HTML file, and we go to Open with Live Server. And I will put that over here. I'll bring that over here. And I'm going to put John as my name. Okay, so we'll just put John, greet me. Hello, John, welcome to the site. If I put Bob Robinson, it will say, hello, Bob Robinson, welcome to the site. John Baugh, that's me. Hello, John Baugh, welcome to the site. So it looks pretty cool. Similar style to what we've used before with the little rounded corner cards. If you've watched some of the other, when we started talking about CSS and things like that. But that's what we get. Awesome. So let's see what we have going now. So we've got another example. I'm going to create another folder for that example. We'll call it Simple Calculator. I put a 2 in front of it so you know which example number it corresponds to. And inside here, again, I'll put an index.html. Index is a common name for HTML, which I believe we covered in the HTML portions. So is styles.css, and then script.js. But as a note, index.html actually is recognized by most systems, most servers, as the default name for whatever the homepage should be. So if you go to a folder, if I were to just open a 2 Simple Calculator here and just say the folder name in a web browser or through the live server, it would, or through a server, it would serve the index.html automatically. Okay, so just keep that in mind. All right, so let me see here. I'm going to grab the HTML for the HTML file. Again, we'll talk about it momentarily. In styles.css, do we have a styles for this one? Oh, I didn't even create styles for this one. Oh, that's interesting. Let me look. I think it'll be the same CSS file. Let me just look here. Alrighty, found it. Here's the styles right here. So this one, just to refresh your memory, what this is going to say is any input whose type is number, we want to style it with these right here with the certain border radius and all that fun stuff. The button is blue, has white text, padding and all the other stuff, border radius, so it rounds it, makes it look kind of smooth. We have button hover to change the background color from this blue right here to that kind of darker blue. And then we have the calc result with a certain style as well. Now the script, this is where our fun is and what our focus is in this particular series of exercises. So there we go again. Since, again, it's at the bottom, script.js is included at the bottom here before the end of the body. It should be the last thing, essentially. Or if there's more than one script, you can put them all at the bottom, of course. But that, I'm going to close the CSS. We're not really doing much with the CSS, I don't think, right now. What this is doing is, for this one, we have a little bit of an interesting situation because our function here actually takes a parameter. A parameter, in case you're not sure what that means, is information you're sending into the function so it can do its job. The previous one, If we open the script.js for that one takes no parameters. We call that a parameterless function. Okay, but ours has a parameter. It needs extra information to do its job. The information is which operation to perform. So it'll grab num1 and num2, which have IDs over here. So it'll grab these values, and it is calling parse float, because this right here, when we go through this and say document element .id or at num1 of num1 .value, that returns text. And we can't really perform math on a text string of data. Okay, string just means a bunch of characters, text data put together. So num1 right there, when it grabs that and does the value of it, whatever the person entered, even though it will be numbers as far as the human looking at it, the system won't know you want to treat it like a number. It'll think you just want to treat it like plain old text, unless you do something like parse float or parse int. Parse float means that someone could actually enter something like 3.14. Int, if it were parse int, then they could only use integers or whole numbers like 10 or 15, no decimal part. Now, it keeps going, so we have those two, but we also grab the calc result element, and that, if we look down here, is a paragraph, so that's where the result will go. And here is an if statement check. Is nan right here exactly with this syntax, because it's case sensitive. You can't just type ISNAN without, capitalizing these two n's. So is not a number or is not a number. So if either of the things they enter in those text boxes aren't numbers, it will return from the function, will not try to perform the calculation, but it will, before it returns or leaves this function, it will set the text content of the result to say, please enter valid numbers. So this is just to keep it from crashing or blowing up or doing something really crazy that we don't expect. If it gets past this, they have entered actual numbers. So that's good. Let num1, okay, or let operation rather, let result declares the result, and if operation is, there's 3 equal signs here. That's how you do an identity comparison. So we're saying, is it exactly containing add? Okay, so it's actually more efficient to use the triple equals if you know that the two things you're looking at should be, for example, I know these two things are text. So if you use double equals for comparison, which you might in some other languages, that is an equality operator. So it will try to do conversions or casting of data types to try to compare the two. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry, just use the triple equals right here. So operation equal add, then we set the result to num1 plus num2. And if it wasn't add, if the operation was not add, then we go down here and we do num1 minus num2. Okay. Now, where does it determine the operation? Right? So you can see that we don't have operation declared anywhere here, but where is it? So where do we get it from? Remember, it's passed in as a parameter. So that data is coming somewhere from the outside. When you actually call it, like we do here, I'll explain this in a minute, you pass in something. So it's taking on the value add. The actual value passed in, to be really specific, we call this the argument. So add is an argument here, subtract is the argument there, and then this acts as a variable. It is a variable. This parameter is a variable that takes on the value of the argument and then acts inside this function like it's a local variable, just like if we declared it, like with const or let. Now, I guess that's a good point to make a note here, is that const, once you do something with const, if I declare it with const here, like I did num1 and num2 and result element, you cannot change those, okay? Result element can't be changed, but when I do let, that allows me to have a true variable. These are actually constants. So it's more efficient if there's something you're not going to change or reuse that variable to point or hold something else, use const. Otherwise, use let. You may see an older JavaScript code that someone uses var, like var myInfo equals da-da-da. It still works, but that's the older style, and you really, really should avoid var most of the time. It has some squirrely behavior that we want to avoid. So it is modern to use const and let. In fact, if you're on a site that's kind of older or reading a book that's older and they use var all over the place, or even a newer book, I would not go through that book or go through that video or what have you. I would find one a resource that uses const and let. Now, they might tell you what var does and how it's different. That's fine. But const and let are what we really want to do. All right, so once it's done that, and it's decided and created the actual result. So these two are numbers at this point. We don't specify a data type. It'll determine the data type for result, so it can hold whatever it needs to. And in this case, these two are actual numbers. So when you add two numbers, the result's going to be a number. So result will take on a number. Then what do we do here? Well, we set the text content, okay, which is a property in the DOM, the document object model. It'll even tell me that it is a node property. You can look right here. It can hold null, which means nothing lives there, or it can hold a string. Those are the two things it holds. So that means the thing we pass into it or give it, assign it, has to be a string of some sort. Since right here we have a number, we're using, again, that string interpolation or template literal, string template string, whichever you prefer, syntax right here, where we have the two tick marks on either side, not single quotes, tick marks. Again, they're on the same key as the tilde above the tab key, typically on the left side. We say result, colon, space, and then the variable's contents will be injected right there. Okay, it interpolates the string. Down here, this is probably a more interesting thing going on here. It's very similar to what we did before. We have add button, subtract button, and add event listener. And we have the click for both of these scenarios. We have the add button and the subtract button, and that's how we distinguish what they want to perform on it. But the second parameter, second argument rather, while it calls this, is different from what we did before. What we did before is we directly called that, or just gave the name of the function right here. And that worked fine because we didn't have to pass any parameters in. But for this one, what do we have to do? We have to pass in either add or subtract, or whatever we want to set this up to do. So what we're doing here is this is a newer, not new really anymore, but it's newer than really old school syntax. This is called a fat arrow function, and it is a lambda style function where we basically just say this is it's anonymous, meaning it doesn't really have a name. We're just saying, hey, here's another function I'm making on the fly, and that's on the left side. On the right side is whatever's in the body of that function. The only thing in the body of this function right here is directly calling another function. Okay, just like the people who made JavaScript for us created these functions like getElementById, where we can call them directly, or is not a number, we can call that directly. Here, we're saying, hey, I want you to call my calculate function. So this doesn't take a parameter, but it calls a thing that does. Okay, so it's basically acting as an adapter that we need in order to pass it to add event listener. So this right here calls calculate on add, and that calls calculate on subtract. So let's see what happens when we actually run this in live server. There's our simple calculator. First number is, let's say I put John. I try to put John, it won't let me. So because they put that into the HTML. So I guess we are stuck with some numbers here. So 14 and 2. If I call add, it gives me 16. If I call subtract, it gives me 12, right? So 333, 331, 335. I can put a bigger number. It'll give me, that's actually giving me addition. This gives me subtraction with negative number. So everything looks pretty cool. I could put floating point values, and it'll give me that as well. Awesome. Okay, so what did we learn in that one? Let's just reinforce what we did. The first one, we just introduced getElementById, access specified DOM elements. We access the value property, which gets user input. Text content gets content into or out or from the page. Add event listener, we learned about that, how it responds to user clicks. And trim, in the previous project, we used trim. That cleans up user input. Conditional logic is when we use if statements, like if this, do that. And then obviously semantic HTML with the labels and everything. But for this exercise, I figured I'd mention that because we used some of that again. For this exercise, we used some key concepts that we reinforced. Our parse float, which converts input string to an actual number. Okay, in this case, a decimal number, a number that can have decimals in it. is not a number or is nan checks for invalid number input. So if you pass anything to it that's not a number, it's just another layer of protection. Even though over here for the input types, I actually specify number. Okay, type equals number. That's if the user gets around that, you should use JavaScript to make your code more robust. Okay, make sure that it doesn't try to do anything crazy. We introduced function parameters with this exercise, operation in this case. So in this case, we passed in either the operation string representing add or subtract. You could have used plus or minus on the buttons or however you wanted to do it. Just essentially whatever you wanted to do would be fine. We used text content again to hold the result of the text. And we did some input validation both in the HTML and in the JavaScript by doing this isNan. All right, pretty cool. So the next thing up, next one we're going to look at is, we will close those. I'm going to create a new folder. This one's going to be called 3, not example, 3 traffic light simulator. So for this one, we will also create an index.html, a styles.css, and a script.js. And for this one, it will allow you to simulate a traffic light using buttons. So clicking a button changes the background color of a, quote, light circle. It will reinforce styling via JavaScript class list and DOM element updates. So let's I'll copy the code from over in my notes. And let me see here, the style, actually remembered that one this time. Didn't have to go digging for it. And then the JavaScript. JavaScript's actually fairly straightforward and simple. We'll talk about it momentarily. So you'll notice, let me run it real quick just so you can see it. So there's our little gray circle. We've got, if I click red or yellow or green, you'll actually see that it's kind of doing a transition too. Kind of cool, right? So if I go back into the code, you'll note that I have these buttons inside of a div called controls. And there's the div ID class light up there. That's where the light is actually living. And in styles, the light, I'm actually creating essentially a circle. So I'm giving it a border radius of 50%, which causes it to look like a circle. So really, really being sneaky here. And we're giving it, by default, a gray background. And you can change the background with these classes. So if I would have assigned that class manually in the HTML, if I would have said, instead of class equals light, I said class equals red, it'll just be red by default. Okay, or green, it'll be green by default. But with the power of JavaScript, we are allowing it based on interactions with these buttons to actually change the light. So again, we have a parameterized function, one parameter. If we had multiple, we'd separate them by commas. We put color. We grab the light. Okay, that's the actual light reference. Now, what is light? Remember, it is a div. Okay, so we grab that light. We set its class name property. This is part of the DOM again. If I hover over it, it's part of the element. So since this is in fact an element, it's a paragraph. I believe it's a paragraph. Let me double check. No, it's a div. Sorry, it's a div. So it's a div. So the element, a div is an element, so it has the class name property. And you can even see the reference that's popping up. The documentation says returns the value of the element's class content attribute, can be set to change it. And we're setting it. That's exactly what we're doing. Anytime change light is called, it's changed back to this. Okay, changes it back to light. And we could use class list.add. So if we had multiple classes to add to it simultaneously, let's say I made it, a dashed line around the border or some other classes or whatever, we could use another line that says light.classlist.add also, if we wanted to do that. But again, this function is not called automatically. It's called when we associate the red button to the add event listener, the click event. Same thing for yellow button has a click event and green button has a click event. If you click the red button, it calls change light and passes red into here. If we call it with the yellow button, it passes yellow and change light green. Now you might think, well, wait a minute, how's that working? We don't have any if statements. Well, you don't need them in this case because the fun part of this is that it actually recognizes the names of those classes because those are class names. We pass it as a string, right? Just like we set this one as a string to light. Now, how does it know which one to use? That's because of styles. So it knows its class light has these properties. It has, or these rules, properties. We have red, okay, we have yellow, and we have green. And these are the ones that have those specific colors set. Gold for this one because it's a little darker and easier to see. But we've got red, gold, and green set for the actual background colors whenever an element takes on these classes, either of these classes. Now, that is set when we do this. So if I pass red in, what does it do? It goes into this. It takes that argument, and it passes in here, and then we grab the element, the light element, reset its class name to just contain light, and then call add color. Now you could set just class name, since it's only doing one, you could say class name equals red, okay? Or class name equals color. You could do that as well, because that's completely overriding or resetting the class. But here's just to give you an example of the fact that you can add more than one class. If I did it directly in HTML, you would put them in here separated by spaces. Like I could say light, dashed, magical. Let's say there's 3 different ones. We could add each of those classes separately if we wanted to. But that's how you do it in the code, is you call class list, which is a property, .add. So if you want one class, you can use class name. If you want potentially multiple, you add them using class list. All right. And we already saw it running, but I'll run it again just to make sure we know what's going on. Red, yellow, and green. Cool. Okay, now what does resetting it to light do other than just changing it back to gray? You might think that's kind of useless. Well, this is actually important beyond just setting the color. Okay, the reason we set it back is even though it does set the color to gray, these other ones will take care of the color. But anything that these don't do, it'll keep these. So it keeps the width of 100, height of 100, border radius, the margin, and this is the transition. That's the one in CSS. We didn't have to do it in JavaScript. It's a CSS transition, which tells the background color to take a half a second and ease into the new color, out of the old into the new. All right, so that's why it looks kind of cool when we do it. So what did we learn with this one? We learned about classlist.add, which dynamically changes element styling. The class name reset clears the previous states. So even if you have 15 classes, if I say class name equals something, it overwrites everything, and it just sets to that one class. Add event listener is modern event wiring technique. CSS transitions, smooth effect when changing colors. We learned about DOM manipulation, which targets and updates the visual element. Okay, in this particular case. Awesome. All right, next one up. We've got another one, another exciting one for build I'll leave them lowercase, build a list. Okay, we will create, of course, an index.html, a styles.css, and a script.js. Let's put the code in. Here's the CSS code, or I'm sorry, the HTML code. The CSS we will put in here. There's just a little bit of CSS here, just for the unordered lists and list items. And then we're going to put in JavaScript. So this one's very JavaScript forward. It's more JavaScript. And let's see how it works. So we'll talk about it briefly and then we'll demonstrate it. So this one's going to show us how to use arrays, loops, and DOM manipulation to build a dynamic list. So the user will type a word or phrase and it can get added to a displayed list when a button is clicked. All right, so let's run this guy. And I'm just going to type, let's say we're making a shopping list and I want to have a burger. I'll click add, hot dogs. Okay, pizza, very healthy, and salad because we have to have greens. All right, so it'll keep adding them dynamically to this list. This is something you can't just do with HTML or just CSS. Okay, so this is really showing the power of JavaScript. So we'll say, I don't know, flour. Maybe you want to bake something later, some eggs. Okay, cool. All kinds of cool stuff. That one wasn't particularly pretty, but it's really focusing on the power of what we can do with JavaScript. So this one has the HTML, again, includes the script at the bottom. We have a section containing an input where they put their text. Its ID is item input, so that's the text name. Add button is the button, and then we have item list, which is the unordered list. So this is different than just a paragraph. It's an unordered list, which means like a bulleted list. The styles, we're just doing basic padding styles and margins. The JavaScript, this is where we create an array. That's what these square brackets mean. An array is a type of object that's going to hold multiple data, okay, multiple pieces of data potentially. We call it a data structure. So anytime you hear the term data structures, or it seems kind of like a scary term or whatever, it just means a collection of data. Now, how it holds that data is why data structures is sometimes intimidating and a big topic. But for here, the array is basically the most fundamental or simple data structure that we have available for us in JavaScript. Now, what do we do? So we have two different functions in this case. They're both parameterless. Now, the only event registration or event wiring that we do is to the add button. The add button for the click event calls add item. So this is the one it calls. Now this one calls update list inside its code. Okay, so we don't have to associate that with an event because there's no specific button anyone has to press to just call update list. We're splitting it out, in this case, not to act as an event handler, meaning to handle the event when they click it, but this is kind of a helper function. This function's performing actions, and we want to split it out rather than try to get all this junk fit in into add item. So we could put all of it in add item, but it would be kind of messy, and it's just better to do it this way. So when and where to make functions, that's sometimes experience covers that, or a completely different course in software engineering and different topics like that. But some of it you get a feel for it. Some people have rules of thumb that they follow, like if it's each function supposed to do something specific and do it well. So this is specifically for just updating the list, and it's a good place to split it out. Okay, so what do we do in here? We'll add item. We'll pretend that update list just updates the list, right? Clears it and then puts in all the items again. But what do we do here? We grab the item input, that's the text. We trim it so there's no extra space, as long as it's not empty. If it's empty, we literally just have an if statement here, so there's no else. So we just skip it. We don't do anything if they entered nothing and they just keep clicking stuff. If they entered something that's not empty, then we call items, which is our array, .push. So if I call it on burger, let's pretend this is in memory the array. If I call it on burger, it will add burger to the array. So burger now contains one item. If I then call it on hot dogs, meaning if I pass in hot dog and press the button, it'll call this, it'll get the value hot dogs, and it'll push it into that list. So what it'll do now, it'll now contain burgers and hot dogs. Okay, so it pushes it. Now, what else do I do? So what if I add salad? It'll add salad. What if I add cheesecake? It'll add cheesecake. Grilled cheese. I do like my cheese. It'll add that to the array. All right, you can also delete items with different functions as well, but we're not really doing that here. Okay, so we add them to the list. Once you add it to the array is just sitting here in memory. It has nothing directly to do with the GUI, the graphical user interface. So it's not going to automatically show in the DOM because we're not doing anything with the DOM when we just modified this little array here. So how do we update it? We call update list. Then later we after that. We'll look there in a second. But after that, we empty out the text box that they entered the new food in and then set the focus back so they don't have to re-click in it. That would be kind of annoying. So this is very common to do is once you've added something to a list, after you type in a name or something, it'll erase it and then put the focus back in case you want to add more things. But what happens now? So if it goes through here, it updates the array but doesn't update the UI, the user interface. We do that inside of update list. So update list grabs the item list, which is what? It's an unordered list. So it grabs the unordered list and it erases it. It erases the existing list, and then it does something kind of cool. It takes our array, and no matter how many items are in it, let's say there's 5, it'll go through each of those, and each of those items is treated like this. So this is another kind of arrow function syntax or lambda syntax, similar. By calling for each here, we could do a regular for loop if you're familiar with those, but this is more modern technique. It's what we call functional programming paradigm. Items.forEach. So the array has this for each method associated with it. And you can even read the documentation. It says performs the specified action for each element in the array. Now, how do we distinguish between them? So each time it goes through, it's going to treat it as an item parameter. What does it do to that item? Well, glad you asked. On the right side of that fat arrow, we have this set of curly braces. And it goes through, and in memory, in the document object model, it creates a list item. So we just call document.createElement and then pass li to it. Since that's a valid element name in HTML, createElement will create that element in memory, but it's not attached to anything yet. It'll set its text content to the item. So for example, burgers or hot dogs or whatever, like we had here, that we've added to the array. And then what does it do? It takes item list, which is what? The item list is that unordered list, and appends it as a child. So remember, when a UL has a child item, which is an LI, a list item, it will add it as one of its children, just as if we had typed it here in the content here. So if you did a UL and I typed, I'm going to delete this in a moment, but if I did burgers right here and then hot dogs like that, that's what it's doing. Essentially, is it's adding it to the document object model. The reason you write HTML is because the browser will open it in memory and then create the document object model and then put those objects as children of one another. So the list item will be a child of the unordered list. And that's what we get. Let's just run it again just to see. So again, burgers, salad, hot dogs, etc., right? And if we click it with nothing in it, it won't let us do that. Grilled cheese, add that at the bottom by using push and then updating the list. All right, pretty perfect. Okay, what's up next? What do we have next? The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create another folder. And for that folder, we're going to call that folder 5-live character counter. Okay, and again, index.html. We also need styles.css. And we also need script.js. Index.html will contain this HTML. The styles.css will contain a very simple styling for the text area that we're going to enter some information into. And the JavaScript will contain a relatively simple function here. And what is this going to do? So this will reinforce the real-time event handling and text input monitoring. So as the user types into a text area, the live count of the characters updates instantly. Okay, so looking at the HTML, we have the header and all the other fun stuff. And again, the script is at the bottom, but you'll notice there's a label, and then this is a text area. So in this case, it has a placeholder. It's kind of grayed out text that says start typing ... with 5 rows by default. And this right here, it just says characters, and then there's a span here called char count, which starts with 0. Its ID is char count. The other is ID message box. So those are the two we deal with over in the JavaScript. And for this one, we have the function, but look at what the event is that we associate. It's input, not click. So this one is going to be looking at the message box, and it goes over here, finds the message box, and as the user types, so input is the event known for that. We didn't just make that up. It's a well-known event for message boxes or text areas. As the user is entering input, it calls update count. What's update count? That's our function we defined here. This one's parameterless, so it doesn't need the fat arrow syntax. We can just do it directly. If you did fat arrow, you could do that like this, but it would be kind of useless. Okay, so it's just kind of silly. There's really no reason to do it because we already have a function that doesn't have any parameters, and that's what it expects. So we just say its name, right? Update count. All right, so that's the parameters, or that's the parameterless function update count. What do we do? Const text equals document.getElementById messagebox.value. So it takes the current value in there, and what does it do? It takes the char count text count, and it takes we've got the text here and we've got the char count here. What does it do? It sets up using text.length. That is a property of a string. And this is returning a string because there's a value here, right? And text.length will return, or any string.length is going to return the number of characters in it. So what happens when we run this? Open with live server, start typing the message. Notice characters down here. So we're not just pulling data out of this text area. As we type, it's actually triggering an event every time you hit a key. So if I type J, it says 1. O, it says 2. H says 3. John Baugh is an amazing instructor. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. He is, notice also when I hit backspace and delete stuff, it updates as well. He is the best professor. Oh, look, autocomplete I ever had, right? And it immediately updates it to 78 characters. Pretty awesome, huh? So that's what this one does, right? It's pretty sophisticated, and you could make it look prettier with more CSS and things like that. So what did we learn in that particular example, example 5? Well, we learned about the input event as opposed to the click event that triggers on every keystroke, not just clicking a button, right? There's other events besides click. So we did so many clicks, just wanted to show you there's other events. When you do .value, that grabs the string out of that text area in this case, okay? So .value grabs the string, and then when we do that string .length, the value .length, that gives us the number of characters, the number of letters, for example, that we have typed. So the dot, or whatever text is .length. We did text content again, right here, because that will update the text content of this char count. In this case, we used a span, okay? A little bit of study for your HTML. The span is an inline element, so that means it can be inside something like a paragraph without starting a new line or its own block. It's not a block element like a div is. So paragraphs, divs, those are all block elements. Span is inline. And we didn't really want it to have its own line or anything, so by default we just want it to just live inside of that paragraph like it's just basic text. Okay. We got real-time feedback, so that enhances our user experience and input awareness. And the semantic form labels, of course, inside of the index, we did that again because it reinforces accessibility best practices like we talked about with previous content like the RWD. All right, next one up, we've got another example. Let's do this. We'll say new folder. We're going to call it 6, even, or odd checker. Okay, and we're going to create 3 new files here, index.html, and we've got styles.css. Excuse me. styles.css, and script.js. All right, I'm going to copy over our code here from the HTML. So HTML looks like this, fairly simple. We've got the section with a number here for input with an ID number checker and then a button. And the example is going to teach us basic number input, conditional or conditionals, and the modulus operator, modulus usage. The user will enter a number and the app tells them whether it's even or odd. That's basically the idea behind it. Okay, so let's do CSS. Okay, so if it's a number type, we style it like this. And then the JavaScript. The JavaScript is sophisticated but fairly short. Okay, so what's going on in here? Well, when the user clicks that button, what do? We call check even odd. What does it do? Remember we had parse float earlier. This one is parse int. This one grabs an integer. So it grabs the number input and gets its value as a string and then parses it and stores that value in num. So as they enter that number, it will convert it. Now, what happens if we grab the result? We're actually doing some basic stuff here by saying this has to be a number type. I guess possibly we could create the number up here with a let, and then inside the else here, we could get its actual value, because this may actually crash if they're able to get through. So that's something to note. But what happens with the result? The result, it's grabbing the result. The result is an element also. What is it? It's a paragraph. So that's where we'll put the data at the end. What are we doing in the if-else? So the if is if it's not a number, then it's invalid. So we say, please enter a valid number. Else result dot text content equals num modulus 2 is equals 0. Now, what does that mean? Well, we'll talk about that in a second. So this right here is a conditional or ternary operator. In some languages, we call it that. You could put this all on one line if you wanted to. So just to demonstrate, this is ternary. It's the only ternary operator, so it has 3 operands. So many of them, like a plus b or num1 plus num2, like we saw before, many of them are binary, meaning they take 2 operands. Unary operators, like if I had a value, if I had a number and I wanted to increment it by 1, I could do that. Plus plus, but it's only 1 operand. So that's a unary operator. But most of them are binary, okay? The assignment operator, like these equal symbols, are binary. It takes 1 operator or 1 operand on this side, 1 operand on that side, and that operator assigns whatever's over here into the, or sorry, assigns whatever's on the left to whatever value's on the right. This one's ternary. It takes 3. 1, which is on the left side of the question mark. It takes number 2, which is in between the question mark and the colon, and then to the right of the colon is the 3rd operand. So this one, what's the first operand do? Always, it's going to be a true or false statement. Something that is truthy or falsy, or in this case, very much a binary or Boolean operation. So it basically checks whether it's even or not. We'll come back to that in a minute, but just think of it as if it's even, it goes to this middle part. Okay, that's the value if true. If this thing at the beginning is false, it jumps over the middle part and goes over here. Could we use if-else again right here? Yes, you could actually put another if-else inside of here, inside this else statement. But this is very compact, and if you know what it's doing, it can be very, save you a bunch of time typing it. So value if true, it'll return the string interpolated again with these little tick marks on the same key as the tilde. It'll store that value in the text content. So it'll say whatever num is even, or whatever num is odd if it's false. Now, how does this work? Well, this right here, obviously, let's pretend this is just a variable. What does that mean? If some variable or some value is equal to 0, that just means is the value equal to 0. But what does this modulus do? What does this percentage sign do? In this case, it doesn't mean a percent. It means modulus. And that means get me the remainder after division. So the modulus itself is a binary operator, meaning it takes 2 operands, num in this case, and 2. And it takes num, whatever the number is, divides it by 2. Okay, and then if the remainder is 0, then this whole statement is true. If the remainder is not 0, it compares it to that. If the remainder is not 0, it is false, so it goes over there. So what if it's 10? 10 modulus 2 is, what do you get when you divide 10 by 2? You get 5, but what's the remainder? 0. So then it would check, is 0 equal or identical to 0? And it's true, so it would go here. And it would print out or store the contents, 10 is even. What if it's 5? If the num that they enter is 5, it'll say 5 modulus 2. What's 5 divided by 2? We're not allowed to use decimal places. We're using that old school integer arithmetic, and we can talk in terms of quotient and remainder. So what's 5's quotient divided by 2? It's 2, because 2 of them fit into 5. 3 doesn't fit because that would be 6. So it has 2 of them fitting into it, but that only goes up to 4. We have 1 left. So the remainder is 1. Is 1 equal to 0? 1 is not equal to 0, so it jumps over here and it will print out 5 is odd. Let's run it and we'll do those scenarios. Got the even odd checker. If I put 10 and hit check, it'll say 10 is even. If I put 5 and check, it'll say 5 is odd. What about 122? That's even. 177, that's odd. Okay? Pretty cool. So that's really showing you some of the power that JavaScript brings to the table. All right, next one. We'll just keep chugging along here. We got 6 done. Let's do 7. Another folder. This one's going to be a color picker tool. Add a little bit of variety to our examples. So we'll do index.html. We will do styles.css, and we will do, of course, script.js. All right, so what's this example going to do? This one's going to use a select dropdown in the HTML to let the users choose a color. When it's selected, it will automatically update the background color of a box. So this is going to reinforce the event handling, styling via JavaScript, and also change events. So we're going to learn the change event, which is different from the input event we saw with when they typed text and it counted the number of characters. And it's different from the click event, which we've seen with buttons. Okay, so let's grab our HTML. So we're going to grab that HTML, put it over here, and we're going to go I'm going to grab the CSS from my notes, and we're also going to grab the JavaScript from my notes. Okay, so the HTML is fairly straightforward. We have a list here. It'll just say select, color select. I'm going to run it. Oh, you know what? I think these are not inside of the color picker tool. I think I've got them in the main one. I have to move them into there or we're going to have problems. There we go. Now they're under there. If I collapse it, you'll notice they're gone. Before it looked like they were indented wrong, so I think they were just at the top level. So we got to have all 3 in there. Now, if I run this, if I run it open with Live Server, I'm going to select a light coral. It'll change it to that color, blue, light green, and then khaki. Okay, so it's not the regular color picker like the HTML version that pops up. We could use that one too, actually, for them to pick a color. But for this one, it's kind of cool. It'll let you pick which one of these you want. And it's doing a nice little transition using CSS. So what do we have? Well, we have the standard header footer types format we've been using, fairly straightforward like we've been using. We've got a section inside the main, label for the color selector. The color selector is just a select. So it's got an ID of color select, and look at all the options. We've got select as one of the values, but what are the others? The others are light coral, light blue, light green, and khaki. Those are their value attributes, and those are going to be used momentarily. And then the user facing value is capitalized and has spaces and looks a little bit nicer. But the actual value that it's going to return, or that JavaScript can use, are these. Okay, and then at the bottom we have a div with color box. All right, we include our JS at the bottom as we normally do. Our styles has the transition like we have used before when we did the changing the color with the circle. and the button. So this is going to be very similar to that one, except you are using a drop-down menu. We've got a width, we've got the margins, and we've got a border radius to make it nice and rounded, but not a circle. What's the script do? Well, in this one, it looks for the color select, which is our select box, the drop-down. Add event listener. This time, instead of input or click, we have the change event. So this select, the select element allows you to detect a change event. When it detects that event, it calls update color. What does the function update color do? This one is, again, parameterless, so we didn't have to do any fat arrow function joy down here. So we have update color. We grab the color select value. That value is not going to be the content or text content, because that's what's inside the element here. The value is an actual attribute. So we'll grab light coral, light blue, light green, or khaki. What do we do with that? We grab the box, and then what do? We set the box style background color to color, and then this right here, this is a little bit squirrely if you're coming from another language, but in JavaScript, we can actually use this very cleverly, that if this is null or empty, if the color that's passed in it shouldn't be, but if it were empty, it'll actually set it to transparent. So it's just going to have nothing. Okay. All right. So we saw how it worked before, but let's remind ourselves. So we select one of these, light coral, light blue, light green, khaki. All right. Back to select. Okay. There you go. So that's what it does. So that works pretty well. All right, now let's go to the next one. Almost done. We're at the home stretch here. We're going to create a new folder. This one's going to be called 8 and form validator. Okay, form validator. And this example is going to demonstrate basic form validation using JavaScript. It's going to check all the fields are filled in before allowing submission and displays an error message if the validation fails. While you can do some of this with CSS, this gives you more control over it. So let's create our files here. Index.html. We're going to create another styles.css and a script.js. All right, index.html. This one's the one that's going to contain the form, not surprising. So it's pretty standard format like we've used before with the CSS. I've tried to keep them pretty much the same as far as that's concerned. So we're not focusing so much on changing the look and feel as much. Some of them are very plain. Some of them are a little more blue and shiny, but they're all fairly standard as far as the structure. The CSS changes, I guess. The HTML is fairly standard. So we've got a main section here. There's a form inside of it with an input for the name, input for the email, and input for the message. And then you have a paragraph inside of it, and then the button for submitting. So that's the submit button. What do we do in the CSS? In the CSS, we have our form content, or our styling content. And then the JavaScript looks like this. Okay, let's run it. Open with live server, see what it does. If I try to submit it without anything, it'll tell me to please fill out the forms or the fields, Bob, and it gives me this as well, right? But you know what? That's the HTML handling it. So let's go into the HTML and delete required off of these just so we can see it in action. You still want to keep that there just in case, but let's see what we did here. So we grab all of these. If any of them are missing, it says please fill out all the fields in red. Otherwise, it'll say form submitted successfully. So if we run it this time, let me try now. It'll say please fill out all the fields. So you can do it. You can actually do it in the HTML and maybe have the JavaScript as a backup. Now, if it does work, John JPBaugh at well, we'll do profjpbaugh@gmail.com, and then hello there. Okay, let's make sure that's profjpbaugh@gmail.com. hello there. If I hit submit, it didn't go to another page because we're not telling it to, but it says form submitted successfully, so we can keep it there. So you can do it in JavaScript. You can actually, a lot of the newer stuff allows you to do it in HTML by putting the required attribute here. But I wanted to show you that there's multiple ways of doing it. Okay, so you can use it as a backup, and also it's good probably to, at minimal, to have the maybe an if statement with if the name and the email and the message are all good, then we say, hey, form submitted successfully, and put it in green. So most of this is pretty standard what you've done before, but you'll notice I'm putting everything inside of document.getElement by ID, contact form, add event listener. This time it's not input, it's not change, it's not click, it's the submit. So form has a submit event. When that event occurs, we can call it here. I actually could do a fat arrow function. Let's do that. I think that'll work. And that should still do the same thing. So let's just fill it in with nonsense. But, oh, you know what? Did I add those? Did I add those back? I must have added those back. Let's put that. Oh, you know what? That's because it's an email field. It's not letting me do that. Prof JP Baugh. That's part of the HTML. All right, let's do that. Submitted successfully, and if I miss something entirely, it'll say, please fill out all the fields. Okay, pretty cool. Alrighty. Now, let's note that you trim the data as you normally would, but you also want to call prevent default, because that's going to make it so that by default the HTML will try to use the built-in engine to submit the form. So we have to prevent the real submission. So that's what the event dot prevent default is. Event is actually, even though we don't call it, we haven't called it explicitly anywhere. You might look over here and say, well, wait a minute, this just says submit. Where's there any parameters or anything? Well, there's not. It's automatically passed in. So when you call an event, it is actually implicitly passed in, and we can decide whether we want to actually address it or not. And in this case, it is automatically passed in. So we just call the prevent default function to prevent it from being submitted, and then go about our business. So what did we learn with this one? We learned that the submit event handles form submissions. The prevent default stops form from refreshing the page. We don't want that to happen. And then the values.trim, we've seen these before, that will validate the form input content by grabbing all these and then comparing them using the if statements. We used a lot of conditional logic, ensuring that all the fields are valid. So this is an or, right? Or symbol. This says not email, or not name, not email, not message. You might look at that, even if you're familiar with programming, you might look at it and say, well, that's a little bit unusual. Name is a string, right? It's not a Boolean, so how do we use not in front of it? Well, I'm glad you asked. So if you have no idea what we're talking about, then just kind of go with the flow here. Some of it you'll learn by rote, but if you are familiar with other languages, you might look at it and say, that's really, really strange. Well, it is. JavaScript allows you to use what are called truthy and falsy values. So truthy and falsy values, okay? So they don't have to actually be Boolean. Although we do use Booleans a lot, what happens here is that if name, for example, were completely empty, or email was empty, or message was empty, or if it was just a bunch, of nonsense, there's not any actual, it was null or empty or whatever, those are all treated as false. And if you have something that's actual legitimate content in the string, it's considered true. All right. So that works with any objects, basically. So we didn't have to say if, name not equal to empty or anything like that. You just literally use it directly. Now the or, just as a reminder, in case you don't remember, any of the operands of the or, as long as one of them is true, the whole statement is true. And we are cascading them by having two of them here. But you've got, let's say any of these, if the name is not filled in, what happens? If name is not filled in, the name itself is treated as false. You put the not in front of it, that means not false, that's true. So that means that this entire thing is true. Even if these are filled in, this one is detected as not. So if true, true or false, the whole thing is considered true. So it would go in here. If all of them are filled in, then the value is true for each of them. So not true is false, or not true is false, or not true is false. So all of them are false. And with or, if all of its operands are false, even when you cascade them, the whole thing's false. So it would go to the else. And that's exactly what we wanted. Awesome. So we got all kinds of cool stuff going with that. The next one up is kind of a little fun one. Let's do a folder. We'll call it 9 form validator. Okay, and then inside here, we're going to create index.html. We're going to create styles.css. And of course, we have script.js. Okay. All right, so the HTML, we're going to put that in the HTML file, good place for HTML. And again, we include this at the bottom. And that example is going to use radio buttons. So this is another element to simulate a one-question quiz. When the user clicks check answer, they'll receive immediate feedback. Okay, so what's in the CSS? This one looks a little bit nicer. It's got a form also like we had before. All right, and now we're going to include the JavaScript. So let's put the JavaScript there. There we go. So let's save this, and I'm going to run it, and we'll see what it looks like. I think those are all under form validator. We'll find out shortly. Okay, so what's the capital of France? Let's say I put Paris, check answer, correct, London, incorrect, Rome, incorrect, Berlin, incorrect, Paris, correct. Right? Pretty straightforward. Kind of nice, has the shading and everything, pops out a little bit. So it's decent. CSS looks nice, but our focus again is on JavaScript. So how do we deal with radio buttons? Well, radio buttons, we have them inside of a form. You'll notice that they are inside. In this case, we put them all inside a label instead of using the for, keeping them in line. But we've got an input in here. This one's type is radio. That one's type is radio. All 4 of these are radio. And then we've got a button outside at the bottom and a bunch of BRs to add breakpoints or extra spaces. We've got the quiz result down here. But why do we make all of them, even though they have different values, Paris, London, Rome, Berlin, why do we have all of them as the name equals capital? So how do we do that? That's so that we can associate the radio buttons together as if they were part of the same radio group. So that not only allows the HTML to ensure that only one of them is checked at a time because they are mutually exclusive, but it also will allow us to do some clever stuff with the JavaScript. So styles, pretty straightforward, form, basic background, some box shadow, form label, and then quiz result at the bottom with some basic margins and things like that. But here's our script. When they hit submit, again, what we're doing is we're calling a function. I had this in my notes this way, but I prefer to use the fat arrow syntax. I think it would work either way. There's some differences, but way beyond anything we need to worry about. So as a side note for those who might be a little bit more familiar with JavaScript, whether you're one of my students and we've already gone through the section in a different materials or what have you, just note that arrow functions don't bind to their own this variable. So in the more complex DOM events, like if you need this to refer to a specific element, you'd use function instead of event up here with the fat arrow function. You would use the actual function keyword, right? Or function word. So, but in our code, we're not using this inside of here. So we're getting the elements via document.getElementById. So we should have no problem at all. Okay, let's run. Oh, did I name this? I named this wrong, didn't I? This is quiz checker. I was copying the name accidentally. Okay, this is supposed to be named quiz checker. I think I was just got too excited and renamed it. Okay, or got too excited and named it the same as the one above it. Okay, this is quiz checker. Oh, sorry. 9 quiz checker. There we go. Okay, that's better. All right, so grabs those radio buttons. We have the styling and everything. What happens when we submit the form? We go in here, we prevent default like we had before, and set the result equal to the quiz result, okay, element. And then what do we do here? This is interesting because answer, we determine which one's the answer by not calling getElementById, but we call query selector. Now, query selector is another function we can use in JavaScript. It's actually preferred for a lot of different things. And what you pass it is, instead of being restricted to passing the ID or something, you restrict whatever the actual CSS selector would be. So for example, if I wanted something that was an ID, like I wanted quiz result, I would literally put the # quiz result. You have to put the # if you're using query selector. With getElementById, it assumes the ID already, so you don't have to put the #. But if I wanted to do this with query selector, in fact, if we want to just show you query selector, I have to put the # in front of it. It's technically a little bit more efficient, I think, to use the getElementById in this case right here. But when you have more complex stuff like this, we use this more often. But for our purposes, it doesn't really matter either way. This one, we definitely need query selector, though. Okay, so input, and then brackets. If the name is capital, the name attribute of any of the inputs is capital, and the colon says if it is checked. Okay, if it's checked, then we get our answer. So only one of them is going to be checked, so it's going to store that element in answer. So if the answer is nothing, there's no answer, please select an answer. It'll set the result text to orange and then return, so we can't go any farther. And right here we have hard-coded the solution, which is not generally good, but for our purposes, very simple, just to demonstrate concepts, it's okay. So if the answer's value is Paris, we put correct. Otherwise, if it's not Paris, we put incorrect, try again, and set the color to red. We set the color to green if it is correct. And again, focusing on this, result. What is result? Result is holding the quiz result. What is quiz result? Quiz result is a paragraph. It's an element. Okay, so result is not just text, it's an element. So its text content is set to correct. Its style, that's how you access the CSS directly inline. You say if the styles, you set the styles color directly to green, or the styles color directly to red. If we had more complex styling, you could say dot, the class name or class list if you're doing class list.add or things like that. But for our purposes, we just had to change one little thing. You can do this directly. Okay, just a reminder what it looks like. Okay, so if I picked London being the capital of France, oops. That's it. What about Paris? Yes. Good. It's Paris. Okay. So this is... oh, you know what? This is goofy. I accidentally typed it here. That's what happened. Now I know where it went. All right. So from earlier, why it didn't change the name to quiz checker, I had typed it there. There we go. Because that's ugly. We will look back here. Okay. There we go. Looks much nicer. Correct, or London, Rome, Berlin, back to Paris. Awesome. All right, good. So what did we learn? Radio buttons, and specifically we learned a lot about the name attribute and how we can use it. It allows single choice selection. So radio buttons are, unlike checkboxes, they're mutually exclusive. We learned how to use the query selector, and specifically with the input, and we specified the attributes. And then also the checked, if it has the checked attribute. We did some with form event handling again, that provides feedback on the quiz answer, and DOM feedback, so that displays the result in real time. Awesome. Now, next one up, this is our final one. I know, it's been a while, right? This is number 10, which I'm going to be more careful with. 10 - favorite movies tracker. Favorite movies tracker. There we go. I will create an index.html. I will create a styles.css. And I will create a script.js. Okay, so this one's going to combine arrays and DOM updates to let users enter and track their favorite movies. It's similar to the build a list, but showcases better use of structure and styling. So let's put some HTML in the HTML file and CSS in the CSS file. Here we go. There's our JavaScript. All right, let's look at it running. Okay, we'll say Titanic. Well, that didn't work. Let's look at the code. Oh, this is from the previous one. I copied the wrong. Okay. There's the right one. Let's try that again. Okay. Oops. Titanic. That's better. Okay. Up. It's got two of these. I think that's a mistake. Let me say Star Trek. There we go. So we're getting double numbers. We'll look at that in a second, but you get the point. Looks pretty similar to what we did before. Okay. Alrighty. Let me see here. So it's an ordered list. So you don't actually have to put the index in front of it. That was my mistake. Okay, we'll just put the a space. Actually, we probably don't even need that. Let's double check it and make sure it looks good. Okay, Titanic. There we go. Titanic and Independence Day. There we go. Perfect. Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right, so how is this working? All right, so we've got our button, we got our ordered list, which automatically puts those numbers in it. We've got the ID for the button is add movie button, and then the movie input. Okay, basic styling like we had before. And for this one, we're again going through the movies. This one actually has index. We're not actually using it anymore in here, so we could leave it out, but this shows you that you could, if you need to, utilize the index, pass it to another function, do whatever you want to do. It'll automatically detect the index as the second argument here in the for each. If you just leave one, it'll only use the title. Okay, so we could put something different like favorite, number blank favorite movie or something. Then we do list.append child, just like we did before. And this one, input, and then the title, grab the title, add movie. Add movie calls update movie list, just like we did before with a push. And we've got our movies array, just like the other one. So this is very, very similar to the build a list that we did earlier. It's just showing you that you can actually add indices or other things that you might need. All right, so what did this one teach us? Arrays with indexing if we need it. We use the for each again, which loops through the stored movies. Ordered lists, the OL, that'll enforce our visual ordering, and trimmed input and reset. So that will improve the user experience. All right, so we've done that before as well, but okay. This one uses click event also. So let's just real quick, we'll just say is my, we'll say number and then $sign. Okay, index. Okay, movie. Okay, so we'll do it that way. Let's see what it does now, just so it doesn't look silly with doubles here. So Titanic, and we'll add that. It'll say is my number 0 movie, and then we could say Star Trek. That'll say it's my number 1 movie, and we can add one to that if we need to. So looks like we're going to probably need to do that. We'll say index inside the brackets +1. If you put it outside, you're not going to get what you expect. And then run it again, and we'll just check it. But yeah, that was my fault. We weren't really using the index properly. My number 1 movie, and then we'll say Star Trek, and we could say that's my number 2 movie. So Titanic is not my number 1 movie, just so we're clear on that. Very well done, though. All right, so That's what I have for you for this one. Hopefully that worked out well for you and you enjoyed this experience learning JavaScript with me with the 10 examples. And I will see you in another lecture, I'm sure, very soon. Bye-bye.